Approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Motion carries. Okay, Joe.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the board. As you referenced, this is your second of third work sessions on the FY19 budget work session. Tonight, we'll give a recap of where you are on the budget schedule and process continuum. The highlights for tonight's work session: you'll get a presentation from property management, you'll get a presentation from the information technology group, and then Bobby Fitz will circle back to you on some questions that you had come up during your first work session. And then, as with all work sessions, we'll have a period for public input. And for those that are interested, the budget is posted online. There are hard copies at Town Hall as well as the library. And if you're really industrious, you can find a presentation of your last meeting on YouTube video. So as far as the budget schedule and process, we've gotten through your budget message, and your first work session tonight is your second budget work session on the topics that I've already discussed. Your third and final work session will be on May 31st. That's going to focus on community and economic development. We'll again have a period of public input. And then June 4th, which is the date of your regular meeting, you'll have the public hearing on your budget ordinance. And then you'll be in a position, if you desire, to adopt the budget ordinance. So you could adopt it that night. You could table it to June 13th. You could table it to another date, just as long as you are in a position to adopt the budget no later than July 1st. Quick preview of what you'll see in detail later tonight. So your first presentation will be on Property Management Fund. If you're following along in your budget books, you'll look at page E4 in your capital budget. It looks like this. The presentation is specific parts of the presentation. You'll hear a presentation on the three-sided shed that we've proposed for Public Works, and you'll get a recap and summary of where we are on pursuing the new fire station. Under the Service, Equipment, and IT Fund, you'll be referencing page E3 of the capital budget. Looks like this. Details that you'll hear during that presentation is upgrades to the AV equipment for the council chambers. You'll also hear some information from our operating budget. One is as a follow-up to the presentation we gave to you at your retreat, not this year, but the previous year, on where we were with our IT and what we've done since then, as well as what our plans are for moving forward. And under Fleet Management Fund, this is your work session 1 follow-up, so you'll be referencing page E2 of your capital budget. You had asked some questions about how much the county will participate, and so we had put some place markers in here in this spreadsheet. We didn't know at the time when we developed this spreadsheet. It's still not certain, but Bobby's got some more up-to-date information to share with you. And then we'll have the period for public input. And then after tonight, we'll have the next work session 8 days from today, so next Thursday in this room. And with that, I will recognize Chris Ray.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. Give me a second here, we'll get this pulled up while Lisa hands these out. Let me make sure. No. I guess we'll try this Chris and Chris show again. We started last meeting with this, and hopefully the second time around we'll do a little better job for you. But well, at least hopefully Chris will pull us through and stuff. But I will start this off talking about some needs at our Public Works facility, and then turn it over to Chris to talk about the process that we'll be looking at over the next several years to put a new fire station in place. And with that, we'll get started. There we go again. Just kind of give you an update of where we are at Public Works facility as far as our maintenance and storage facilities. In 1987, this 5,000 square foot facility was built. It's a prefabbed engineering building. Like I say, it's been there approximately 30 years. It has 4 bays that have 12-foot roll-up doors and 1 bay with 14-foot doors. We struggle a little bit with the door size. our backhoe only can fit technically in one bay without literally lowering the boom to drive in the door. The building, if you hadn't been in a while, has a small tool room or equipment room, has a small unisex restroom. We have, in the past, over the years, put in a vehicle lift and some work benches and shelving. And generally, we use that for general vehicle maintenance of public works, equipment storage, and supply storage. I know. A couple of deficiencies that we'll talk about here in a few minutes that the facility is lacking is when we basically pull a lot of our equipment in, a lot of our equipment has to stay in because of the weather conditions. We just lack that safe movement around there. We like to, be able to move safely around the equipment. Sometimes we get caught skimming up in between a plow and a door. We lack that space for storing some bulk supplies. We have to store some of our bulk supplies off-site, which we'll talk about. And then during some of our weather emergencies, we have to struggle to try to get the equipment in. It just don't fit. And we got to decide whether we keep a backhoe out or a skid steer or a plow or whatever other type of equipment and asset we might need for emergency response. I'm going to get this rolling, this wheel down. One of the things we talked about was safe movement. Here you'll see on your left-hand side some pictures. That's our street sweeper. We got cabinets there for storage for fuel and oil and miscellaneous supplies. If you actually open up that door, and you can almost hit the cabinet. So both the cabinet door and the truck door cannot be open at the same time. If you look at the second picture there's a situation where this past January where we had a snow event coming where we actually brought in our trucks with the plow, our power broom there, and the sweeper had to stay in because it stores water. And we tried to squeeze in that utility vehicle so we could use it in downtown. As you can see there, that's a pretty good example of trying to skimmy around certain things to get to the bathroom or just get to the other side of the building. Things get extremely tight. This roller, I won't have to go clicking, I guess. Storage equipment, you can see here in these couple pictures. On the left-hand picture here, we have a truck with a salt spreader on it and a plow. We were able to back this truck up and get it just between the columns of the blue the blue vehicle lift here, but the actual plow is sticking out the door. So we're awful tight. We actually even used the lift for storage of the skid steer during that weather event. This next picture here is some of our dry storage. You see sweeper rooms here, concrete, coal patch, regular masonry. This is our vac trailer here. It has about 350 gallons of water on it for storage for its use, so it can't be outside during adverse weather conditions. So as you can see, we are a little tight for equipment storage and vehicle storage. And that works better with a click. Here's what we're currently using for some of our bulk storage off-site. Some of you may remember the old lab that used to be at the waste treatment plant before we built a new one in 1993. We are currently using that for some storage. It's approximately 600 square feet. It's got about 3 small rooms in it, but a couple downsides to it. It is remote, it has no power, the windows are boarded up, and the roof is leaking. Couple of Connexes that we salvaged from the Parks and Rec in the old armory. The Connexes work really well, but for storage, but they're long and they're narrow. So by the time you leave 4 feet for a walkway, that total 8 feet wide, you're actually only having 4 foot for storage. So a square footage of the 2 units of 640 actually comes down to an effective storage of about 320. So a couple areas that we use for off-site storage. A couple of those items that we use for off-site storage, I won't go through this whole list here, but to give you a feel for it, is some ice melt, Christmas decoration, building supplies, the Christmas tree, some salt brine skirts for the trucks, which help keep brine off the chassis when we're doing that, asphalt tack. So we clearly have a need for a bigger space to store our supplies and things we respond to with. This is the other piece that we talked a little bit about already, but the storage for emergency response. Trucks with plows and all must be stored inside. What happens in and if they're left outside, the conveyors will want to freeze up. We've had hydraulic issues where the hydraulic gets so cold it doesn't want to flow, and so once we get that call to respond in, we spend a significant amount of time de-icing vehicles and getting them ready to respond. We need to, due to our limited staff, when we get there, we need to be able to respond and hit the streets immediately. So, we don't want to get to the point where we are struggling with our equipment not working. Clearly, diesels also don't like the cold weather. Clearly having them inside into a temperature building that's even 40 degrees or and all is significantly better than being outside on a 10 or 15 degree evening or night. One of the things I want to show you here in this picture to the right, this truck here barely fits in between the door and the plow. This truck with the plow on it doesn't even fit in the door. We had to ultimately relocate this and actually decide to move the backhoe out so this truck could be inside. So it's just basically the size of the truck and the size of the vehicle just are not working well together. So a couple of things we've got to keep in mind that we respond to multiple emergency response things from ice, snow events, tropical storms, and hurricanes. So we have to, each type of storm event, we got to put a priority on which equipment is the most important and move that equipment inside from protection. I don't know. Some effects for the lack of storage. We clearly experience higher maintenance costs of that weather effect on batteries, like we mentioned about the hydraulic fluid, the bearings, exterior finishes. You see two tractors over here that I love to see put into some type of cover storage. Since we've had them, I've had dry rot on both seats twice that had to be replaced. I also had to repaint both of the hoods. This is a situation where, due to the type of event that was approaching, the backhoe had to be moved outside. Of course, we also struggle with those exposure to weather that dry rots the hydraulic hoses, and so thus we get premature failure of those. We get without storage of our signage have to be outside, we get premature dry rotting and fades quicker, requiring faster replacements. So what do we need? This is what we're asking for your support for tonight, is a 3-sided shed. We're thinking approximately 30 foot deep, 80 foot wide, and it's got 3 sides on it. We would look to face this to the north. The enclosed side will be faced to the north to protect it. We're just trying to look to keep this very simple. Do a ABC or a stone floor. We want a little overhead lighting and exterior lighting. Pull down electrical connections for block heaters, and we feel like the opening is going to be 12 to 14 foot tall, probably closer to the 14 to make sure backhoes can get in. So what are the type of things you think we'll be storing in it? This picture is perfect for it. Bulk storage here, tractors, skid steer, backhoe. There's a mini excavator over here. Some of the things that we want to take out of our enclosed shop and put in a shop like this and to protect it, and also allow us to respond to your emergency events. Little idea of what the cost that we're projecting. Like I said, we're trying to keep this project as simple and as cost effective. We're going to look to do all the demolition in-house. Construction is estimated at 60. We're going to do the site grading and stonework in-house ourselves. We've got some electrical, some fence modification, some engineering and contingency, bringing you to a requested amount of $139,000. One of the things we went at and looked at is, all right, building a building can be expensive, but can we look at some other spaces that might be readily available for us, and maybe is something we can lease? We went out and started looking around. And started struggling a little bit, trying to find the rented space that would be proximity to us, have the door heights we need, can handle the exhaust for diesel fuels and stuff, that it's not, if you're there cohabitating with somebody else, the diesel fumes will not be adversely affect them. A lot of times we need a large entrance ramp to get up to these loading docks. That's going to be additional cost. But we looked at, even if we could lease square footage at $2 a square foot, we're looking at a monthly rent of about $4,800 with an annual cost of about $57,000. And if you compare that to purchasing a building, in basically a quarter years, we'll be able to pay for a building. So we felt like long-term that was our best cost. we're a little optimistic that we're very optimistic in my mind that we could even get $2 a square foot. A local realtor from Raleigh shared with us that he thought the Zebulon area going price for industrial storage and space would be somewhere between $3 and $4 a square foot. So we're very conservative priced with the prices we have shown with you. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Perry to talk a little bit about our fire station.
All right.
Wait a minute, Chris.
Yes, sir.
Oh, wouldn't you, that shed you're talking about, wouldn't you want it taller in case you wanted to put a dump truck on it?
Say that again, sir.
12 to 14 foot high, that shed. Wouldn't you want it a little bit taller?
We
Just
can
in
look at
case-
something-
Just in case you wanted to, you know, put one of your bigger trucks up under
Yeah,
there.
the trucks will fit under that. The highest piece we have is the boom on the backhoe. It currently is about 12 and a half. So we would probably say 14 would be the minimum, give us a 1.5 foot clearance. But one of the things we'll look at is to try to keep the cost down is a standard design from a building manufacturer, and that could be 16 feet. So I think we're going to be somewhere actually probably between 14 and 16 feet. I know.
Where did you look for spaces to rent? Is there any places around town you
We
could,
did speak with we wanted something that was convenient. So the place we went first is talked to Comfort Master in the building across the street from us
Yeah.
and spoke to them. They had some space, but we had some challenges about getting access in with the ramping system through their loading docks. We would also have to put in some fencing to secure our materials and keep separation. And I think they had some concerns about us going in and cranking a piece of equipment and that exhaust contaminating other sites. So we did look at that one site locally because of the proximity to us. And then we spoke, Robin is a former real estate agent on the commercial side, and she spoke with some of her previous colleagues, and that's where we got some of the square foot numbers from. And once we got those square foot numbers, we just felt like at the end of the day, the proximity to our site, us being able to maintain it and use it was probably a better option for us than lease space. But clearly, that's always something we can look at. Any other questions? Good questions. Thank you, Mr. Strickland.
Maybe one comment, Chris. There are different kinds of metal structures, and we're all aware of that. But some structures can be converted. You're asking for a three-sided shed. I'm sure that down the road somewhere you'd like to close off part of it and make it completely closed for your bag storage or whatever. Thanks.
Yes, I think that's definitely that's a good point. I think that's something we work through the design. We incorporate where it can be retrofitted. I know and stuff, and it could be very much needed. So,
Yeah, that was my point later on.
good. We'll take that into consideration during the design process. Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, we'll move right into the fire station portion. You recall from your retreat, you were presented a report from Brooks Innovative Solutions who evaluated our fire station needs, facility needs within the building itself, as also taking into consideration the growth of the town and the growth of the fire district that we protect. And you recall that their recommendation was to build a new facility somewhere near the intersection of 264 here in Arundel to better serve it and go with a single location as compared to multiple locations, which we had looked at in the past as a possible solution as well. So what you have in front of you and represented in the budget before you is the beginning of this process. Our first year would be a huge year as we start going into the project and identifying, what pieces of the puzzle would be necessary for the site, for the building. Again, just some kind of overview of what do we want to do, what's available, identifying those. Really no land purchases in the first year, definitely no construction of any type, but again, preliminary work to try to figure out what do we want to do, what's available, what would work for us. What you see represented in the budget is a $50,000 amount for preliminary engineering reports, should they be needed on potential sites, as we evaluate the sites and look at those. So what you see in front of you represents this multi-year process as we move from preliminary site and preliminary assessments if you will, even partner identification. We've got, the county obviously has been a big part of this discussion from day one on two sides of the coin, one being the fire service side protecting the county, but also in the idea of EMS co-locating. They have some building or station needs as well, and they continue to express a desire to be located with us. So that this first year we could kind of begin to nail some of those down and figure out where everybody's at and commitments and that kind of thing. We moved from there to the FY 2020 as we begin to move through land acquisition and begin to do some of our preliminary design work and get some of that stuff. And then from there, we would move to construction in following years, as you see represented there. This second slide here kind of just takes that and gives you an example of how it could function out. The biggest thing is, as you all can imagine, this is a very fluid process because, we don't know how long it'll take us to find a suitable piece of land to locate the facility. We don't know some of that, how long it'll actually take, but this gives you an example as it walks us through the FY19, the preliminary engineering work that may have to be done, and the budget amount of $50,000, which is in the current budget. And then it just shows you some estimated land acquisition, architectural, engineering work that would happen, the design work, and then ultimately the construction of a facility. And what you see represented here is pretty consistent with what Mr. Brooks represented in his report and some of our needs that we're aware of, somewhere in the neighborhood of a 15,000 square foot facility with administrative areas. Some of those things that you were brought up to speed on, those identified deficiencies within our existing building would obviously be addressed to try to correct those deficiencies with the construction. But again, I just want to point out that what you see in the budget before you is this first year phase. And the last picture I'll just give you just as an idea of, what could this thing look like? And what you see in front of you is a similar facility of a similar square footage that was constructed here in North Carolina. One that just seemed to, there's nothing really specific about it, but the characteristics that I just described, this building does meet those. And it just gives you just something, sometimes it just helps to see kind of what is our goal, and this could very well represent what we're looking for as we go through this process. But beyond that, I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
What do you think the value of the property that we purchased some years ago for a fire station is worth today? And has anyone considered us surplusing that, trying to sell it in any event? I realize that's not going to be an easy sale, but trying to sell it and using that money against some of this cost.
I don't think we really haven't gotten into, what exactly is it, the value of that property, but I can tell you we have already through Mark and the planning department, as that area looks to develop, he's got that on that radar that piece of property could be available because there's potential developers looking at the property that surrounds it. So I know Mark is staying in contact with them to see if that may be an opportunity for them.
Well, as long as we're making folks aware that, as far as we're concerned, that's going to end up as surplus property. And that could be an offsetting revenue for some of these costs.
Most definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Other questions?
Chris, isn't the first thing you'd want to do was get a commitment from the county whether they want to partner with us as an EMS station? Wouldn't that be the first thing, because that would determine how much land you'd use and how much building you'd have to build?
Exactly, and I think that's, in my mind, that's one of those key first year, before we ever get into any land acquisition and construction, is figure out the players in the game, if you will. The EMS part is very important because it affects several different facets of the building. Base space, obviously. Do they intend to house one vehicle or two vehicles? Could have an impact on how large the building is. And additionally, the space that they occupy within the building. Many of you may know that our current ambulances are staffed by personnel that they work 12-hour shifts, much like our police officers do. So the building accommodations they may need may not match what we need. So we need to find out, how many square feet, what type of design. That way, getting that information early on will help us develop a better design as we go through the process.
Will the county help us with that, was it $50,000?
We haven't had any conversations with them regarding the PER part or the preliminary stuff at all. You know, there has been conversations, basic conversations about construction costs, and especially on the EMS side. They've typically, not to say that's what they'll do here, but they've done in other locations is they've paid a proportionate share to the part of the building they occupy. So if they occupy, you know, say 10% of the building, then they would pay 10% of the cost of construction of the building, as an example.
Do they need us more than we need them, Wake County?
And you're still referring to
Chris, I know you mean.
you're still referring to the EMS side, I'm assuming, or just in general?
I'm just talking about answering calls out in the county. Are we more important to them, or are they more important to us?
That's a really loaded question.
I'm asking that same
It
question.
is. I mean, it kind of would balance out.
That's the best way I can describe it. When you look at the needs of the municipal area we protect, when you look at the needs of the county area, you can look at different facets. When it comes to population, for example, we protect as many people in the county as we do in the town. There's an unusually large, not unusually, but there's a significantly large number of people that we serve in our county area. When you look at call volume, the majority of it is here in town. We run about 70 to 75% of our calls within the corporate limits. When you look at land area, there's 25 square miles in the county versus about 5. So it's an interesting, I will say my personal opinion, who needs who? I think we both need each other, because together we can provide service much more efficient than either one of us could provide it individually. But that's, I think the arrangement we have now is a very good arrangement because it provides many efficiencies and allows us to share the costs.
Thanks, Chris.
Shut up.
As thinking about the preliminary engineering in this situation, our needs here in Zebulon can't be so particular that someone in this area hasn't built basically what we need.
Right.
Therefore, they probably would share their engineering plans with us, would they not?
Oh, most certainly.
That would certainly cut down on our cost.
And a good part of what you see represented in this budget, for example, let's say, and I may have to lean on Chris because I'm beginning to get into his area, and we both recognize that he's the expert in this. But should we identify multiple sites, we may want to look and see, from a soil aspect or rock on the site as we begin to evaluate sites, and that would be the primary of what you see represented here as we evaluate sites. But there are, yes, when it comes to the design phase, there's other projects that we can look at. Even the county has some prototype facilities. We may, find something we like there. But most definitely we could identify even other municipalities. This right here again is a facility built right here in North Carolina. So it's obviously there may be some possibilities for savings there as well.
Sure.
Well, I personally really think that the county should be involved from the get-go on this. And we should be seeking a commitment from EMS as well, because that feeds directly into what you proposed to research in 2019. And if they're going to be a part of it, we go this way. If they're not, we'll go this way. So we need to approach them before we start spending money, not just on our behalf, but theirs as well.
Sure.
Okay.
Maybe just one more comment in regard to land acquisition. I know you're talking about selling the property to someone. There's also a possibility that we might trade this property for another piece of property. No, I'm not saying tit for tat, but if we could find another piece of property that meets the criteria.
Sure, I think we would, I'm probably speaking a little bit for the team as a whole, but I think any option like that we could look at and try to find what is the best we would love to consider those options. One of the parallels that I drew, and that's something that you may can relate to, I was very impressed at our retreat as we saw the school system explained how they look for different sites, school system sites, and how they develop the different criteria, and then they were able to compare different sites. I think, I can foresee us using a similar model as we evaluate sites for a possible fire station location.
Other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Ladies. I'm gonna see what I can do by some air.
That's what I need to do.
Well, the IT committee is made up of Chris Perry, Dennis Brannon, and myself, and we have been very busy this past year. So we're going to do a review of the 2017-2018 budget and what we've been working on this year, and then we will go into reviewing the CIP and what's being proposed in this next budget year. We previously talked about retreat presentations, and back in 2017, you remember that Shannon Tufts with the School of Government came and gave an in-depth presentation to the board about our IT services, how it's provided, and where our pitfalls were. And some of the big ones are listed here, dealing with connectivity, speed, email and internet, security, the aging equipment we have that needs to be replaced. And the biggest one was staff time that is spent doing IT work that is really not the job and the duties that, we were hired to do. So as we look at this, the IT committee got together and we talked about the first thing was what we thought was the most important, which was security of our network. So what we did is we hired an outside company to come in and do an independent audit of our security system, of our network, and look at the security of the system. After that, he came in, he sat down, he talked with us about its weaknesses, where we could do some fixes that would address some of the security we have, and then what we needed to look at down the road so that we can move into making our system more secure. The next thing we looked at was service delivery and how we're providing our IT services both internally and externally. The first thing we looked at was how are we currently providing services with our existing company, how we're going to provide services in the future, maybe with the company that we have or maybe with a new company. And then finally, we looked and talked about staff and what staff was currently doing and what the needs would be for future staff to provide IT services. Currently this year, these are some of the projects that have been worked on. The radio replacement, this was phase 1 for the fire department. We replaced all the radios there. That's been completed at $145,000. Parks and Recreation, Community Center, they replaced the projection system and it's working well. We have addressed the issue that was addressed by Shannon of connectivity and speeds by replacing fiber at this location, and then the internet connections for the remote locations, fire, public works, and the community center. All that is provided by Spectrum currently, so it's a much faster and better system. We've replaced switches that were needed to do some of this work, but it also addressed some of the aging equipment that needed to be done. And then the phone system is in the process now of being replaced. And finally, we're going to come to the last part of this, which is the 5-year CIP that's being proposed by the budget. The radio system upgrades was a 3-phase system. As we said, fire is completed. The next 2 phases are with the police department, which is being done over 2 years. The first phase would be, in this next budget, would be $92,000, and then third phase would be $76,000. And then that would complete that project. The next project we're going to talk about is the upgrade to this facility, the equipment that we have. If you remember, this building was renovated in 2009, which is when all this equipment was installed, so it puts it at being 9 years old. So, you know, it's aging out, and the compatibility with technology as it's changing is making it very difficult for us to do the things that we need to do and to upgrade. When it comes to cameras and associated equipment, Eastwake TV replaced that earlier this year at no cost to the town. So that has been totally taken care of and upgraded and state-of-the-art at this point. The audio equipment, as we've said, and projection equipment that we're currently using is 9 years old, and some of the issues that we have is that we have intermittent problems, and when some things go down, we have run into the problem where they're no longer making that piece of equipment. So we can't buy a new piece of equipment that works with what we have, and they're not making parts to fix it. So what we ended up doing is we purchased a used piece of equipment that has no warranty, so if it goes down, we're right back into the same situation that we are right now. So what we're proposing in the next budget is to phase this in over 3 separate budget years. The first phase was proposed in the budget by Joe for 2018-2019 to upgrade the AV room. We did find some savings in our budget this year, and we've been able to move forward with replacing this equipment now. So it's in the process of being done as we speak and will be completed by the end of this budget year. The next phase would be the replacement of the microphones and the speakers in this room, as well as the controls that make it all work. So we would be replacing the current mics we have with lapel mics. We would be adding not microphones, but speakers that would address some of the sound problems that we're having with the audience being able to hear when we're speaking and presenting. So we would replace those, as well as the controls that would handle that. That would be done in fiscal year 2021. And then the projection equipment and monitors would be replaced in fiscal year 2022. And just to put that in perspective, our current projector that we're using has a little over 3,600 hours on it. The average for a projector is 2,000. So we're getting our money's worth out of this projector. The average life for the projector is 8 to 10 years. So, we're right in the middle of, its useful life coming to an end. So, we've got it budgeted, but if something fails, we're going to end up having to do a budget amendment and replace it at a higher cost because we're going to be under crunch to get it done quickly. So that's, the risk that we have to take, or we don't have to take, or that we would be taking based upon what we're presenting here. So do you have any questions?
Questions? You said that Eastwake TV paid for the cameras and that. They will not participate in the AV room at all?
They will not. That is not necessary for them to do what they're doing.
So it's necessary for us because we want to store these meetings, is that?
Because we want to record and store these meetings and project sound in this room. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to be clear of, what we're doing, because it seemed to me that some of that would be for them.
Yeah, I have asked, and I have been told that they would not participate in that.
Okay, well, never hurts to ask again, but still.
I will have no problem doing that.
Yeah, I know you don't. The other thing is on projection equipment. Does this number include perhaps looking at a projector for the conference room as well?
It does not. What we're going to do in the conference room is we're going to replace the monitor that is in there with one that you can plug into with your laptop, so you can do presentations via laptop on a larger monitor in that particular room.
Well, I know we have that screen that comes down, but we never use it.
Yeah.
Well,
and
that I see, anyway.
we don't, because it's very difficult to hear when you set a projector up and it's off-center as well, so you can't set a projector in the center of the table, and it makes it harder. And with technology the way it is now, it's easier to present with a monitor and just plug into the monitor.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions?
Lisa, I've been saying this for the last 3 or 4 years, and maybe you or Joe could speak about this. I always thought it would be, look into getting all the commissioners' iPads. It's just too much paperwork, and I think it would save, maybe you don't agree with that, maybe Joe. I'd just love to hear some talk about that. Just to say, it's just too much paperwork. And I know y'all spend a lot of time copying. You got to with all this. If you want to speak on that, or
With
is
the-
there a benefit, or it's just not worth it, or I don't know.
Well, there's a couple things. We have talked about it. I've talked to several municipalities that have gone paperless. Some of them like it, some of them don't. Having people that are able to function well with an iPad and be able to maneuver through a document, is important to be able to do. As far as your budget book, that would probably be copied either way,
Right, yeah.
no matter what. We've had some that have gone to it, and then what happens is they've had, and I'm talking about other municipalities, where they've had people come back and go, they want both. They want the paper and the iPad. So you've spent the money on the iPad, and they can't function well with it because they can't see it, they can't read it, so they would rather have paper. And I'm not saying that you guys would do that, but that has been some of the things that we have discussed and talked about.
I can speak to that a little bit, because I use an
I know,
iPad.
I know.
So, you're right, that sometimes you want a hard copy. I wouldn't actually have my iPad here tonight, except it's not on it. So, but it's a heck of a lot easier than having all these trees that have been killed and put on a desk. But I first got introduced to it when I was on Risk Management Services Board, and they bought an iPad for each member. I think today you can probably get one in the $1,000 to $1,200 range. They're not terribly expensive, but I found it extremely useful and convenient. It did take a little bit of getting used to, because I was used to marking up stuff, and I can't really do that on my iPad. I can do it on my computer, but I can't really do it on my iPad, not with the programming I have. But with a little effort, you would get used to it, and it sure is convenient to me. So that's my experience with it.
I just, save paper. I don't know what it costs a year for just paper, but, it'll save trips, coming and delivering paperwork, and, you can always look back on stuff and not trying to find the papers somewhere, just so convenient. I think, and since we're talking about IT and, stuff like that, it's a good time to bring it up. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've mentioned it 2 or 3 times over the years, and,
It would be much easier to keep your information, because after a while, you keep all this, the paper builds up to the point that, that's
you can't find.
got too much to do, and you can't find it anyway, so.
Well, I get mine through Dropbox, and how often do you clean the agendas out? I mean, I notice now there's probably 3 or 4 still on there, which is fine, but at some point, you have to get rid of it.
If we were to go in that direction, more likely than not, we would end up with a program that's
Yeah.
made for agendas to go in that direction to make it easier and get away from using Dropbox.
Well, the league quit Dropbox because of security issues
Yeah.
with it. So we would probably be facing some of the same stuff. So, but anyway, yeah.
Yep.
You get, Curtis, anything else? Anyone else for the question? Thank you. Excuse me.
All right, I'm just following up on a couple questions that were posed at the last meeting last week about the fire truck purchases. So I think it was two main questions that we recalled. So we'll just go through those and answer those real quick. If you've thought of any others since last week, or if any come up in these answers, we'll be glad to address those now too. So the first one was, how much is the county going to contribute to these trucks? The second was, we believe was can we defer the first payment, not make it next year, make it the following year more when we're going to take delivery of the trucks. So what we've been conveyed verbally at this point, there is no funding agreement in place yet, but for the latter, they were going to contribute about $195,000, and what they're going to do is whatever term that we do on the loan, they will do an equal amount of that $195,000 per year. So a 16-year loan, that's about $12,216 a year. For the engine, that allocated amount they're going to pay is $207,000 and some change. That over 8 years comes out to about $25,876.
What percentage is that, Bobby? Of the total cost of the fire truck, what percentage?
Well, what that turns out to be on the ladder is about 18%. On the engine, about 35%.
Is that the going rate, 35%?
What?
40, what about 40-some percent? I thought they were paying like 40% or something more than that.
42,
Oh, yeah,
43.
that's their participation in the fire service down here, yeah. It is.
The fire truck, 35%. So,
Well, I mean, take our operational costs, they're what, 42%? Chris?
42, 43, I think it
Yeah.
is. I think 43.
Yeah, it's much higher than that. I think they're taking advantage of us. I'll be honest with you, I really do.
It was 40.
Because if we pulled off of the contract for the rural and said, okay, you just go out and start a rural fire department, there's no telling how much money it would cost them to do that. And I really think they're not pulling their load with us. I think they're taking advantage of us.
I think what Chris had said, those were amounts that they paid for the last ones they did.
Yeah, I can give you just a little bit of background on the two. On the engine, what they do is to arrive at that number, they look at what they paid for the last one that they purchased, and they use that for calculating a budget figure. So they calculated the 43, it's 42 and some 42.59 or something like that, but for a conversation, we'll say 43%. They applied that 43% to the last cost that they paid when they bought an engine. So that's where you see that number that comes from on the engine. If you recall from last week on the ladder, there's currently no agreement in place for them. So what they've done is they have obligated to provide us funding for rescue services. So what they did, what they have you see represented here is the same thing they represented to Garner and Fuquay, who came with the same request, that they applied the funding percentage to their maximum rescue cost. So that's why you get the 195, 465 which is their obligation to provide help with rescue services, and we're going to put some rescue capability on that ladder. So that's how we were able to get some county funding to assist with that project.
What percentage did they contribute to window ladder truck?
100%.
Right. Thank you.
Excuse me, Bob, before you go on, let me just clarify for the board. If you look at page E2, I was pulling this budget together before this information was available, and so you'll see projected county contributions next year at $50,000, so this is obviously less than what I was approximating. I just wanted to draw attention to that, and that's on page E2.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that, but yeah, so the total contribution on both of them, about 400,000 or about 38,000 per year. That's for the first 8 years, that's on the ladder and the first engine. So as Joe mentioned, that's less than the 50 in the, on E2. And then the second was, can we defer that first payment? We can do that. Making the first payment next year, all it does is basically creates an additional interest expense over the course of the loan of about $85,500.
Why would it do that?
Just interest expense. Like you're taking the loan, you're still talking about taking the loan now, because we need to take the loan now to,
Well, what I was talking about was getting a commitment for the loan without a draw against it.
I don't believe they'll do that.
Well, if they did, then we wouldn't be paying $85,000 in interest over the life of the loan. But if we have the commitment, just like a line of credit, and I don't know if we can do it or not either, Bob, but it just seems to me that, if we're going to take the full draw and start paying on it and then sit on it, and if so, what's the offsetting interest earned?
Not 85,000,
Well,
probably
right.
about a couple thousand, honestly.
Yeah, it'd be minimal, and it just seems to me to not be very practical to borrow that money and then sit on it and pay
Don't use it.
Right.
the interest and a payment on something we don't have.
Well, we did investigate, I think Chris heard on the, this afternoon, on the prepayment, like, we say 3%? So we could say.
3% on, okay, help me again, I'm sorry, I don't have my book here, but the ladder truck was what, 1.2?
1.1,
1, and the engine was,
600.
so, okay, we're looking at 1.7 million, taking 3% for early pay.
About 50,000.
But it's costing not to defer it and go ahead and make an early draw, if you will, that's my terms, obviously. It's costing us, we save 50 and then it cost us 85, so it's 35,000. Is the true cost to us. Is that right? I mean,
Correct.
am I thinking right? I guess is what I'm
Makes
asking.
sense, yeah.
Okay. I don't know, I need to chew on that some, I think, but and I heard you said, I don't know. Well, I'd like you to dig a little deeper and see if you can find out.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions
Any
anybody
other
has?
questions?
Okay, thank you.
Chris, I'm just so curious, if Hopkins buys a new fire truck, how much does the county pay for that?
100%.
That's,
That's food for thought, isn't it?
it behooves me that I pay the same county taxes as the people in Hopkins do. And then I also pay town taxes.
Yeah, the difference.
So I can't figure why
Not
we
to
don't
defend
do
them,
this.
but the difference is you don't pay a fire tax, and they do.
That's correct.
But, I know, Curtis, I agree with you, I'm just saying, you need all the facts.
Percentage just don't add up.
I agree,
to
I
me.
fully agree with you.
I don't know.
Well, like I said, if we just took a look at the contract and said, well, if y'all aren't gonna help us any more than this, we'll just look after ourselves, and you look after yourself.
It'll probably get to that point.
It seems to be heading that
As
way.
funding, as the funding goes, and they cut every year, don't they, Chris, kind of?
They reevaluate every year based on a 3-year rolling average. This coming budget year, it actually goes up, but I'm talking tenths of a percent. So I got excited when I heard it was going up until I saw the actual numbers. But it is based on a rolling average. So as development occurs on either side, there's several factors, area, property value, population. So as those numbers change every year, they reevaluate, and it's based on a rolling average.
Other questions? Okay.
All right, one other thing before Joe moves on. I'm going to give you another copy of the fee schedule. There were error or two on here. If you could just replace D1 through D11 in your books with the corrected versions.
Okay.
Do I need that?
Okay. Is there anyone here that would like to speak with regards to the budget? Okay.
Hi there, I'm Mary Beth Carpenter.
She fusses at me for not getting close enough to the mic, so I'm going to turn around and do the same to you.
Hi there, I'm Mary Beth Carpenter. I'm Executive Director of Preservation Zebulon, and with my husband Scott, we're restoring a 1910 home on East Horton Street. I was just recently appointed a Wake County Historic Preservation Commissioner, and I just last week finished my certified local government training. And the statewide trainer had encouraged all of us to go back to our local governments and make sure that our long-term planning included preservations in the plan. And in looking at the budget and the long-term plan, I didn't see a lot of evidence of that. And I just wanted to bring up a couple of points that I felt were important to bring to you tonight. Planning in conjunction with preservation standards that follow the Federal Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation would help if we are awarded several historic districts, or even just one. It would enable tax credits to be applied for by our businesses downtown or across Zebulon, and also for non-income producing properties and residents that want to fix up their homes. If they do it in regards with the standards, and we are in a historic district or districts, then they will be able to apply for tax credits of up to 40% for income producing properties and 15% for non-income producing properties. In your budget information, there was a suggestion of a creation of an appearance code to be established for downtown. And I just ask that if you consider preservation standards to be in those codes, so those businesses that do want to take advantage of the tax credits can do so. If you could just consider that as your planning code. Also, Zebulon rejoining the interlocal agreement opened up $22,500 of funding for us this year from Creative Area Preservation and the State Historic Preservation Office to study our whole area and to take an inventory. And right now, there is a study going on that's encompassing 350 homes in the area. That's about 1,000 residents, which is 15 to 20% of our whole town residents. Once the study is completed, Preservation Zebulon would like to proceed and ask for a National Register nomination of one or more historic districts. We'd like to apply for that. The application does cost some money. It's not cheap. We are raising funds right now for that, but depending on what the surveyor finds, it will be in the range of $12,500 to $25,000 to apply for a National Register nomination. Once that is granted, once we can go ahead and apply, and if that comes in, then it does open the tax credits, which will help raise the economic potential of the town as people fix up their homes, get the money to do so, and it should raise our property values. And it certainly will help businesses that are in those codes that they want to apply for the costs. So I also just wanted to say, in going to this training and hearing what all the other towns are doing in Wake County, I urge us to be competitive with what our other local governments are doing. For example, in Wendell, they offered a match to their historic people to go ahead and apply for their National Historic Register nomination. So the town commissioners offered them a match. In Cary, they have their own 7-board commission now that's funded by the town, and in Wake Forest, they have a preservation planner on staff. So they've gone ahead and done a lot of planning and ahead to make sure preservation is included in the budget and the planning for those towns. And I just want to be sure that we are thinking of that so we can continue to be competitive. And just in wrapping up, if we put preservation into our planning, it will help the safety of our town because we won't have homes that are deteriorating, which invites crime. We will have economic development furthered by being able to offer tax credits if we have National Register historic districts for non-income producing and income producing properties. And we'll have the pride in the community of having one or more National Register historic districts. So I ask the town to consider allocating some funding toward preservation and planning toward preservation in their long term. And lastly, we are the only town in Wake County to have 0 landmarks. And I know right now this board is going to meet and vote on having Wake Lawn become a Lake County local landmark. So we will then have 1, but right now we have 0. And we would like to work hard to having more of our properties become local landmarks. And there is a cost to doing that as well. CAP does pay for that, but there is a cost to having that. So having some of the money in the planning would really help with that and would help for our pride of place and our sense of community. So again, some funding and planning for preservation in our long-term plan will help increase the number of landmarks and increase our civic pride and help with economic development. So thank you for considering my request.
Thank you. Any other people that would like to comment? Okay, Joe, report?
Nothing to add.
Well, I have something to add. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Exactly.
You making the motion?
That's exactly.
In a second. We're adjourned.